Currently, we are in an interesting time of America and around the world. Church attendance has gone down to 20% of what it was, and the pastors are beginning to say, are we ever going to get the church attendance back up? What's it going to take? We'll try to answer some of those questions in a moment. Welcome back to our study as we look at how to get church attendance back up now that we're moving through COVID-19. We know that how do we say this, that they want to kind of keep the pandemic going. They want to keep people wearing masks. They want to keep people social distancing. They just want to kind of keep everything stirred up, some of the people of society. Others of them say, let's get back to normal. Let the dust settle. If people die of COVID, that's the way it is. I myself, I've had a very light case of it back in the spring. It affected my lungs a lot, but moving right on through it. But what is interesting right now, they're saying that if things don't change, there could be up to 60,000 churches close within the next 18 months. Now that's a huge number. They say that 28% of the evangelicals are not born again. They're saying that less than 10% of the sermons that are preached from the pulpit do not contain anything about heaven or hell. That actual evangelical sermons giving an invitation at the close of that sermon. I've heard a lot of churches that way, where the pastor says, the Lord bless you and keep you. But he has never given an invitation for the people to know Christ. 6 out of 10 Americans, 62%, expect Jesus to return, but only 56% believe there's actually a heaven or a hell. So how are we going to deal with this? It's almost half of the Americans, 44%, have no idea where they're going to go when they die. James, that is startling statistics. That's
pretty
scary.
large. Well, and I don't know where everybody else stands, so I don't worry. We usually do a little bit of pre-talk before, but sometimes we don't, and I have no idea.
Okay, let's do some pre-talk.
No, let's talk about one of my statements is, were those churches already the churches that are in Revelation that are dead? Should they come back, those churches? Should those churches have never been allowed to still be where they were? Is God using this pandemic to reset and create a healthier church by getting rid of some of the people who never know, and to give us that insight of what the situation really is? That, again, those statistics are scary, but those statistics might have been hidden by the reality of a church that has so many people that just sit in the pew because it's where their grandmother's grandmother went. And they believe they're going to heaven because they go to that church. And so in my church, we have seen growth, and we've seen a weird growth. And I say weird, meaning we've seen people who didn't know the Lord come to know the Lord and now becoming leaders and doing more in the church. And we see people who were leaders in the church who have left. And it seems to be one of these, were they really knowing what they were doing and who they were? And have they just found an out because of this situation that we're in? And so for me, the number one thing that I think to be reminded by is a church grows by we as the saved sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ to people who are not churched, not the people who have already been in our church. Mm-hmm. And making sure that the people who are in our church are Bible-believing, gospel-understanding Christians. And I think we just kind of had God kind of wiped off the dust and shoved it aside, and now we're kind of resetting a place to try to build a better foundation of what it was. So,
well, now you've answered all 6 of my questions. Let's pause and have a word of prayer, and we're through with this video.
No.
But you did hit the nail on the head in the fact that part of it is folks that are disenchanted with church, and all of a sudden now this gave them an excuse to leave. I had a call from a lady the other day. She's studying for a doctorate, and she called me. I'm kind of like, I don't know why you did that. But she said, I got a question. In churches today, why do people go to different churches? I said, there's basically, I see, and I've been in interchurch ministry for almost 40 years now. And I said the main reason is family, friends, and music. Those 3 points. I go there because my brother and sister go there, my mom and dad. And her next question was, do they understand the church theology? I said, no. Most of them I find couldn't tell you what the theology is of that particular denomination, what their bylaws are. Basically, in the Protestant faith, we believe Jesus Christ was born, rose, sinless life, sits at the right hand of the Father, all of this. It's the little bylaws that get, so people get distracted from church. I've had an opportunity to not go, so hey, good TV show on Sunday morning. Gary?
Well, I'm going to kind of agree with James. The church I attend has the same things happen. We've actually experienced growth. Now, I do minister with Celebrate Recovery at another church that's a very large church, and they fall right into that category what you were talking about. They have not seen the people come back. They've probably lost more than 20% of the people that used to come. And I'm in agreement with James. I think this is just a purification process that God is doing, through the pandemic. I remember hearing J. Vernon McGee say, well, you got your saints and your ain'ts, and they're both in the same pews. And talking about the power of the sermons, I mean, there's a lot of sermons, and I've heard them on television before, and I got to turn them off because they're not really sermons at all. They're more like self-help teachings, and that's not the power. I've been doing extensive studies through the book of Acts many times, and there's one common theme. There's a lot of different sermons in the book of Acts, but they all have one theme in there, and they talk about the crucifixion and the resurrection. I mean, that's what the gospel is, and that's what it said. But Paul says that's where the power is, and it says the message of the cross is foolishness for those who are perishing, but for us who are being saved, it's God's power. And a lot of churches just haven't been preaching that. They haven't been preaching the power of the cross, and I'm with you. I don't know that those people are actually been born again.
Well,
yeah.
And one man was asked one time, do you go to church? He says, nope, I've been there, saw nothing I needed. And that's what happens. The churches that do the storybook and the self-helps, folks will walk right back out of it. It's a swinging door. But they have shown in statistics that if a church will teach the blood of Christ, the cross, the crucifixion, and the miracles of today, the people will come to that church.
Right. I mean, most of you guys know I'm from the Calvary Chapel background, and that's what Pastor Chuck Smith started doing in the late 60s. He tried all the self-help stuff, and he was completely unsuccessful. And he said God just told him, well, just preach the Bible, just teach the Bible, line upon line. And that's what he did, and all of a sudden we have a church explosion, and it wasn't nothing more than just teaching the Bible.
Mm-hmm. There was a study that I went through with a group of the guys in my church, because I do guys ministry on purpose. And one of the things that we went through was studying how modern churches act towards males and allowing males to be what they're supposed to be in a church. And allowing, it's a term, because boys start reading lesser at an older age. I mean, they don't read as early. They're not as talkative. They're also not as open to singing as gals. So if you look at some of the growth in church, the things that seem to take place the most all surround females being the leadership inside of most of these churches and planning and having these things occur. And men have been relegated in many of those churches to trying to sit quietly and do what they're supposed to do. And the leaders in the churches that are males are usually guys that sing. Mm-hmm. And they're guys that are more outspoken and who read more and who are more studious. And so for a male to be brought to a place where he feels comfortable and wants to go to church, you have to challenge him on his role as a male and as his role as a leader in the church. And you have to, there's all these things that are in this book that just point out to you how to grow men who are healthy and want to bring their children to church. And you can look at those statistics every week and see, well, dad never wanted to go to church. He went and golfed, but mom brought the kids. Or the kids brought the parents, and the mother came first. She was saved first, and then the man starts coming, and he doesn't do anything in the church. So there's a whole growth that can happen of just challenging men, knowing a man and going and meeting him where he is in your workplace and speaking into his life and telling him his importance in the role of what Jesus has for him. And that grows churches.
Right.
And it's amazing how much it grows a church when a man goes, I should be here. I should be doing this, and I'm going to bring my kids, And it's sad that I've seen so much of that growth through a divorce, where a man knows he needs to go to church.
And that I remember in the studies years ago I did, they always said, just stop on a Sunday morning as you're preaching and count the people if you get a chance. 70% will be women, 30% will be men. Mm-hmm. Go to the men's bathroom and see what it looks like. Does it look like a girl's restroom, or does it have deer heads hanging on the wall?
That was part of the study that I've done. Is this church made to make females feel? Why is there a picture, a woman's picture in the men's study room?
Yeah.
Why does this not look like a place that guys want to hang out? Mm-hmm. Why aren't we doing this Bible study while working on a car in a garage?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Have a ministry that outdoes things that men like to do, but at the same time focus on the Word and their growth. Right. Don't just make it a club where people go and play basketball. Make it an actual growth.
Right,
place.
Because the Word of God has got to be the most important part to make the church, strong. Because even Jesus, going back to the book of Revelation, I'm thinking the church of Ephesus. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says, oh, you're doing great, but I've got this one thing against you. You've left your first love. And
it's one of the things that is a barometer, a test to all of this, is where is the pastor in his compassion, loving, and caring, and where is the congregation?
Yes.
Back in my biker days, when my wife and I and kids would many times invade a church on Sunday morning and get a whole pew to ourselves and nobody speak to us, we can pretty well put a judge on how that church is operating because they were there. I was at a church here recently, and after going to the church, and I was even the speaker, two people spoke to me that morning in the congregation. I was kind of like, do I have the plague? Did I not put deodorant on today? But the churches, and I'm in churches all the time. It's part of my ministry. And you just find churches that are unloving and uncaring. So you take a guy, he comes there, he gets snobbed. Is he going to be back next week? No, he's not going to be back. He's going to be gone. So as we look at these things and begin to understand that a church that has a program is not as effective as a church that has a ministry. And a church that does not involve the congregation will soon lose the vision. Does that make sense?
Sure. Everybody should have I've preached this all the time. Everybody should have their own ministry. And once you're a believer, you should have your own disciples at some point in time. And all a disciple is someone that's a student, or learn, because the word ministry, what does it actually mean? It just means to serve. And I can attest to that. And if you're actually having a down day or you're having a season in your life where you may not be feeling so joyous, the best way to turn that around is to serve somebody else, is to minister to other people. And it's just amazing how that'll change your whole outlook on everything.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was a simplified way that you said it, but I want to dive one step deeper of it is a church has to be developed from the true gospel that Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven and salvation. It has to start there. It has to then go to the fact that God is the creator and maker of all things, and that the Word of God is something you should be in and be regularly reading. And if if those three things aren't there, that church is already dead. It just doesn't know it. Mm-hmm. And you just have to, you have to fight for it. And when we start doing Ephesians study, with the guys, we're studying Ephesians, and I challenging men. Are you doing that? Do you agree with John says over here that you no longer have this issue and you are no longer struggling with this? If not, then you better be working on it. And when men challenge men and work towards those things, they grow in a way that is exponential. And the gals are usually ahead of the guys in their faith and their growth. And when the men start coming, they start racing alongside them to grow with them. And it's this, you just have to plant that seed that way. This last week, we had our pastor, or one of our other pastors, administrative pastor, says greet some people. We haven't done that in so long, and now we can again, right? And so I just went down and went and saw some friends that I hadn't seen in a while because I work in the back and do the video ministry. And then I was walking back, and I see a guy with a guy that I know who is struggling to grow his own ministry and reach out, and he obviously has brought someone. And I walk up to the guy and said, "It's so great for you. Are you Irish? I'm almost 100% Irish." And he literally almost cries and he hugs me. And he's in church for the first time that day.
Wow.
And that's, he just, to give him a moment of that, I'm like, "That's great, man. This is great meeting you. I hope we can catch up later." And he left. Like I missed him. I didn't get to see him after the service, so I don't know what his story is.
Yeah.
Who knows what seed is there?
Right.
But I do know that mattered. I mean, that's an amazing thing, that simplest thing matters to people who are unchurched, and to keep them in a church and start growing them. Now, growing them is my job, and making sure they grow themselves and others. So.
Well, back to what all the statistics that you were just pointing out at the very beginning, one of the things that it could be, as Paul even tells us in the last book that he wrote, to 2 Timothy, that in the end times, towards the end, there's going to be an apostate or
falling away.
So what, to have that means there has to be a decline of some, just of some degree. And
Yeah.
we maybe, that maybe where we're going.
Well, the Bible is filled with small is better. Look at Gideon. All of a sudden, he went down to the side. Look at Jesus. He went to 12. He could have had 100 men. He could have had a whole congregation, a synagogue, but instead he took a few. And that had challenged me as I was studying this week, that I've seen the decline inside of prison walls because they are still enforcing the masks and the social distancing. And you go into church, and here's a chair, and there's a chair, and there's a chair. And so it's saying to them, you're not welcome. But if we take those 20 and we begin to pour into them the gospel of Jesus, I think we'll see small become what God wants us to.
Right.
You take one not Gideon and turn one into a Gideon when you already have a Gideon. There's two Gideons.
Right.
And then that just exponentially grows so quickly.
Yeah, I've used that before in a sermon illustration. That said, the illustration was, I said, if we had enough money to fill Arrowhead Stadium up every week with 70,000 people, and we had 70,000 people come forward and make professions of faith, and we did that every month, and at the end of
The whole world.
the end of a year, we'd be further behind than the day we started. But if you just took one person and ministered to that one person, and they became a believer, and then two, and then four, and then within 50 years, the whole world's population would be believers.
Yeah. And I had a pastor one time say, if you do a fantastic presentation, the problem with that is next week you've got to do a better presentation. And the next week you've got to do a more grandiose presentation. But he said, if you present the cross of Jesus Christ and begin to watch how you can adapt what's going on right now and draw people back in, it'll begin to work. So,
and grow their relationship with God on their own.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
that's what keeps people interested. So
here's the points it says with that. Evaluate what are the essentials of worship and what is elevated above worship, and discard the rest of it. Bring adaptable is taking away the sacred cow. Oh my. How many churches have I seen with a sacred cow? They don't want to, we've got to do this ritual, or we've got to do that little doodah or whip-a-dee-dee. We got to have the children's sermon, or we've got to have this or that, or we aren't having church.
right.
And so it says, take away the sacred cow, replace it with a God-focused ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Too many churches, things have become idols. Use them to change the old ways of hosting the church, and most important, be encouraged. We're in a time when God's being taken out of everything, but God is everything. And we need to get back to a time that we can put God back into everything. One other thing I need to really discuss here, let me shuffle through my notes real quickly. The power of invitation. 41% of the people come to church because someone asked them.
Mm-hmm.
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 I've heard that before too, and and I've been guilty of it also. Why don't I ask somebody every single week? And I know that's important, because they're actually, if they say no, they're not saying no to you, and you just have to put that block on. They're saying no to God. It's not it's not you personally.
Well, and one of my friends, Ben, I brought him here one night to talk to him about maybe trying to be part of the study. He said something to me. He says, "Did you preload your gun though?" And what do you mean? I said, "Did you pray to God today to put someone in front of you today that you could invite to come to know the Lord?" And it's like it's steps and steps deeper of where are you at in this daily, what you should be doing. Of you remember your salvation and that day you wanted to tell everybody, and now where are you at? And how many people are you telling? And how excited are you to remind them of, I know something. I know a secret you don't know.
Right.
Let me tell you about this. And suddenly one day you get shamed back in it. And also understanding the cycles of that. Of we have cycles. We have seasons. You know, we get discouraged at times. You know, there's programs that work really well for a season. And then they become those golden cows that it's like, this ministry really isn't working anymore. It's not actually doing what it was meant to do. But then at the same time, we'll see 5 years later that ministry brought someone back who remembered that ministry that's no longer there. Yeah. And they're like, well, what happened to this ministry? And it's amazing because those seeds were planted, it had its life, and now it's gone. And this person is still back in the church. And it's nice to be able to see those miracles come back around.
3 motivating factors. Number 1, almost half of those who consider returning to the church said they would do so because they feel it will bring them closer to God. And when people begin to say, well, I'm not sure I'll be closer to God. The second one is they'll return to church if they have sensed a void in their life and they're looking for something. And right now in the world today, we got people looking. It just comes back to that invitation. And number 3, they are looking for people with values that will encourage them. Otherwise, not discourage them, but to encourage them. And so as we begin to look at this, we begin to evaluate how do we get people back to church? Simple answer, present Jesus.
Yeah.
Right.
Give us a couple closing thoughts or a closing thought.
No, we know that, I know for a fact that it's important to go to church, and I know the internet church has got a place and a time if you're physically disabled or you're sick or something like that, or you're out of town. That's okay to do your internet church, but you don't just go to church to listen to the sermon as well. You have to fellowship with the other believers. What does it say in Hebrews? I'm going to quote Hebrews 10:24. It says, "And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works." Mm-hmm. So we need to stir up within each other. We need to be encouraged. Christianity was not meant to be a solo sport. I mean, God doesn't want you to be that secret agent Christian. He wants you to get out there and minister with others, get to know other people, get into your smaller groups, so you can, when someone's hurting or someone just needs to have a prayer time, or they need to share something intimate with you, that they'll trust you with that kind of thing. You can't get that if you're not in church. You can't get that on your own, just watching it online or something of that nature. So that God made us to be interactive, creatures. We need to have that interaction with other people, and it's real important to have that interaction with other believers, with like-minded believers.
Mm-hmm. And you have to earn the right to speak into people's life. You can just walk up and go, "You're a sinner," blah, blah, blah. That's a horrible structure. It doesn't work very well. But when you're under a car with them, helping them change out a starter because they heard you're a guy that might know how to do that, and that you're also that really nice guy that their sister said was at this church. That's a great time to say, well, why don't you come to my class? My class is really fun. Guys like my class. And then you talk about, let's read the Bible. And then they go to, there's ways to outreach and actually grow and develop a relationship with people without it having to be, well, we all sing in the choir together and we all, because for people who aren't interested in that, we've got to reach them where they are.
Right.
And find, did Paul want to go to all of these places? No, but when he went to them, he definitely found fruit through the ways that he could share and he can grow. And for me, the hardest part about a church developing is not being able to be with people who are challenging one another enough, which is one of the reasons I'm part of this ministry. I walked down the hallway at my office, and a guy down the hallway I didn't know was a heavy believer and a very studious guy. We ended up talking for like an hour at my lunch, just standing in his doorway. And it was extolling and exhorting and questioning different beliefs, and it was just beautiful because we enjoyed Jesus Christ and what we have. And for people who don't know that, how are they going to ever know that if they go to a church that's just about the soft sell and what the best book written by this guy about self-help is? And those are often the churches that we have out there today.
Right.
If you're a pastor and you've been watching this and listening to the ways to bring your church back, keep it simple. Teach Jesus Christ. If it's just a few people, just keep teaching the cross of Christ and begin to encourage your people to invite. Let's get past that 41% come to church. Let's get past the sacred cows that you don't want to slaughter that maybe need to be not a part of your church service anymore, and begin to find ways to say, Lord, how do you want me to do this? And he spoke to Gideon. He said, get rid of all this stuff. You don't need this. All you need is me. If you don't know Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, that's the step. Number one, ask him, say, Lord, forgive me of my sins. I believe you are the Son of God. Find a church, find a Bible study group, find some Christians to have fellowship with, and then get active in what you're doing. Thanks for being a part of our study. Send us a note. Tell us what's going on with you. We won't put you on any mailing list, but we just love to hear from you. God bless.